I just found out that ABBA is doing some kind of reunion. And I think this proves that there is a God for sure. But anyways, I want to talk a little bit more about flow, and then I might be over it for now. I was just thinking about the comparison of somebody achieving flow through, say, extreme adventure sports, and that would take, say, a number of hours to get to the point where a person would be in flow while they're doing the activity, and even to the point where they master it. And I even feel like a person would have to ride bigger and bigger waves to achieve that flow state. So it would be a flow state, but it would still be a state of sort of seeking that experience and doing a particular experience to get there. And I feel like the manic flow that's induced by the universe, no particular experience is needed. Wanting a particular experience actually gets in the way, and a person can be so in flow in daily life that one is brought to tears by the beauty of a flower. And that is seeing the flower beyond the ego. So to me, this spending all this time getting to the point where one can get in flow in some kind of particular sport is missing the point as well. It's not really a state that we need to try to get to. To think that we need to try to get to it is actually getting in the way of us being there. We don't really have to do anything in particular. I think there's a little bit of a difference of, say, being in a flow state naturally, say embodying one's mania and practicing one's mania to actually be able to contain the flow. That's what I feel like with the manic consciousness. It's more about practicing to be that elite athlete version of oneself in daily life, to actually be able to contain the extreme energy of flow. The extreme energy of flow that is the manic consciousness is like a huge wave that one needs to ride in daily life, and one doesn't even have a choice. The power of the universe just brings it in, and it's up to us to sort of embody that and be able to ride that wave in daily life. And all that extra energy is for the good of the world. It's not for one's particular pleasure, and if it gets turned into that, it disappears. So it's interesting how people in extreme adventure sports turn it into sort of like a particular pleasure, and they have to keep repeating it in order to get it back. There's not that much difference from doing that than, say, taking MDMA and having one's ego erased. It's sort of relying on external circumstances to produce that oneness state with the universe. That state is how it is. We don't have to do anything to produce it. In my mind, it would be much more powerful for people to just practice these spontaneous social behaviors and break up the habits of the normal ego consciousness, and do random acts of kindness and change the social fabric that way, which would actually maybe create the preconditions for this natural wave of energy to infuse one's being, because it's always there. It's just being blocked by our habits and our regular thinking process. So it's more about breaking up that thinking process, and using extreme sports is one way to do it. Like if a person starts to get flowy and then decides they want to get into some kind of sport, well, that's fine. Once one is in that sort of flow consciousness, it's a different state of seeing and being from which to make decisions, or to notice what one wants to participate with. It's a learning by playing, and one is actually playing with one's life and life energy, and is an instrument of play. And I thought of the question, is this a playful universe as opposed to, is this a friendly universe? And if it's playful, it means we can play again and we can learn again. And I also thought of this idea about how a person that goes into manic consciousness, their energy is a different level, their consciousness is a different level. And if you think of Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic field, it's almost like the morphogenetic field level of one society is, say, here, and one's trying to pop into this higher consciousness, but the morphogenetic field, the gravity of that, brings a person down eventually. But I feel like these people popping into this higher state of consciousness over and over slightly alters the morphogenetic field over time. And it's trying to alter the morphogenetic field, and it's trying to create the preconditions for more people to see and be that way. Unfortunately, it's misinterpreted. We're not actually seeing people that go through these states of consciousness as people who pop into extreme flow states and actually embody something really spectacular. And then, unfortunately, when a person comes back, the process of coming back is difficult. It'd be likened to somebody falling off the wave and breaking all their bones. You wouldn't say that person is like mentally ill. You would just say that person really injured themselves. And it's almost like a self-injurious process, because it actually injures the ego. It scrambles the ego, and the process of one's ego sort of recoalescing to come back down to the level of society's morphogenetic field is almost like one breaking all of one's bones and having to re-heal again. But it's misinterpreted, and then it's seen as some kind of like long-term thing that needs maybe permanent medication, and that's not really how it is. A person just needs love and care and acceptance, and to be kept safe and fed while they reestablish connection with this dis-ease of the collective. This next bit I want to talk about is not really very mysterious, and none of it really is. A couple of weeks ago, I created a long list of questions, and I don't really look at it very much, but when I randomly feel like it, or randomly sort of go to it in my consciousness, I sometimes look at a little bit of it. And I talked about in a different video how questions are perhaps, well, in the context of flow, questions are perhaps a way for one to get a little bit flowy, because instead of putting one's precious attention on the repetitive story, the me, the ego, questions naturally get the brain to wonder. And wondering is sort of like not knowing. And the story is the known. It's going on about the same old thing. It's stuff that we already know. And it's a very, very limited domain, whereas the rest of that which is not known is unlimited. And I feel that questions are perhaps a way that a person can get flowy, because of the way they sort of disarm the ego. And even if they don't necessarily consciously, they perhaps do subconsciously, which is where some of that precognition stuff could happen. So it's like planting seeds so the mind and the brain can sort of look for something else. I read a book, Psycho-Cybernetics, and I can't really remember it, but I remember that it talks about how the brain is like a servo mechanism, which means it's sort of seeking what we're focusing on and thinking about. So if we're always thinking about our little story, we're not really going to see much beyond that, and it's actually getting in the way with seeing what's right in front of us. So by asking questions, I feel it's part of that servo mechanism process, and it also makes something else more salient. I remember having a discussion with a friend years ago, before I had a manic consciousness experience, about how if you hear about something for the first time and then you're driving down the road the next day and you see a sign that says that exact thing that you had just learned about, now how did that happen? And she mentioned it was about salience. Things become salient to our brain because of that discovery. So by asking questions, we make other things salient to our brain, so we will just look there and see it. And in that case with the sign, maybe we drove by it 100 times and never saw it. So there could be a lot of things that we've been going by 100 times and we don't see because we don't have that context. We haven't asked that question. It's not something we have considered. So it invites us to consider something else. So I encourage you to make a list of your own questions, and maybe a long list, and you can ponder over them, or you can just look over them quickly, and it's a way to get one's brain to start looking for something else. And we have to look outward a little bit for more information. And it's not even about finding the answer. It's just about asking the question. And so some of my questions are, and they're not really that exciting, but where is the beauty? So that's just a question to remind me that when I'm in a state of consciousness, maybe in retrospect, what I notice is in certain states of consciousness, I'll notice beauty. So if I'm noticing beauty, I'm in that state. And I might not be noticing that I'm noticing beauty, but if I'm in a state where I want to consult the questions, then again, I can consider the concept of noticing beauty. Now, the concept of noticing beauty is not the noticing of beauty itself. And so all of these are just concepts, and I'm thinking one day that I would want to let go of concepts and writing things down and stuff, and just not consult things that I've written down in the past. And I'm not yet there, partly because I want to share some of the stuff, or at least talk to myself about it. And what am I grateful for? That's a pretty obvious one. What can I share and what can I give? And that's a world centricity question. And the question I got from Tony Robbins is, what were today's magic moments? And usually for me, those are very simple things, like observing two people smile at each other. And a question I thought of that could be just the only question I would ask myself if I could pick one question. And I might have talked about it before. It's, how are you contagious? And that really brings everything that I feel that I've considered in terms of the manic consciousness and embodying one's mania, and the posture, and the gestures towards others, and the world centricity, and the sharing and the giving, and all of that. It's really acknowledging the ripple I'm putting out there and the resonance and what I'm creating with each beat of my heart. It's how am I contagious? And it's taking responsibility, thinking that every single electrical impulse and electromagnetic field of my body is having an effect on reality larger than I could ever be aware of. And if that were true, how am I contagious? How am I showing up? And not about what I want or what the world can give me or what I need, and all this ego stuff and this desire, or how much TV can I watch tonight, or oh, I can't wait to watch this favorite show. It's how am I contagious? How am I showing up in the world? And the interesting thing is that when one really gets with that, what one needs and what one wants actually is right there. Because what one needs and what one wants is actually just to be one's best self, and then it's just who you are. And when you are who you are, and you're capable of learning and thinking for yourself, you don't really need very much else than that. And a lot of these supposed needs that we have come out of this fundamental lack of being in that place where we're actually learning. If we would have never stopped learning as children by being crammed with all that useless information and told how to memorize, and we already knew how to learn, and then they said, sit down in this desk and we're going to teach you how to learn, and you'll be learning, and that actually stopped the learning process. But if that would have never been stopped over time, we would all be freaking geniuses living in utopia. But we were programmed and trained into very narrow bands of existence, and being a professional, which is just memorizing more and more stuff in a very small area, and we think that is learning when it's not at all. Because if we were learning and always learning, we could look at something and understand nearly everything about it without ever cramming knowledge into our head about it. We would just understand it, we just get it. It would be self-evident. A lot of things are. And there's definitely need for knowledge and specialization in a lot of things, but there's a lot that we don't. And by educating people in just a very limited way, and then getting certain band of people to become professionals because they have managed to cram and learn that way, and then the other people who don't learn that way, because that's not learning anyways, they maybe go off in this other direction, and then you got the professionals and the ones that need the professionals because of this divide in the learning. And then we call the other people, well, they just don't get it and blah, blah, blah. But that's not true. It's just their learning process was stopped and they weren't able to cram like the ones that are able to be programmed in that way. And then the ones that are programmed and in society in that way are said, you have the knowledge, let's help these other people. And it creates the whole haves and have-nots, and the smart people and the not as smart people, and now they're starting to talk about multiple lines of intelligence and all that. But society is still designed to reward a certain kind of learning, and that learning is actually perpetuating the design of society as it is, which creates this big divide of people keeping way too much than they actually need, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. But anyway, I think that we're programmed into being dull and not being able to learn for ourselves. So we look to professionals for the answers, when if our brains were clear, we could actually quite easily understand it ourselves. Another thing that goes along with the TRE and the body awakening method and the rebounding and the psoas exercise and the bedroom yoga and the rolfing is coherence breathing. That's another way to get one's physiology to sort of get back into proper alignment with nature, with one's natural flow. And there's apps for that and stuff. And I've done it in the past, but I haven't done it lately. There's an app called Stress Doctor, and then there's an app available through completecoherence.com, but you need a chest strap or something to sync with the app. The other one, you just put your finger on it, and I don't know if one is more accurate than the other, but both seem pretty good. In Dr. Daniel Siegel's Google Talk about mindsight and interpersonal neurobiology, he talked about an experiment where people were blindfolded for a given period of time. I think it was a couple weeks. And in those couple of weeks, the brain actually changed its structure to make more neural connections for the fingertips and the hands, because a person was using their hands more to feel around in society. And it happened over a pretty short period of time, and it took over quite a large region of the brain. So he was saying how fluid the brain really is, and how it changes the brain map to map the world. And he actually said the mind changes the brain, or the mind creates the brain, which boggled some people's minds in the audience when he said that. But in that same way, I feel mania is sort of the energy of the universal mind, and it's changing our brains. It's remapping our brains. And I also feel like, what is it that we need to become blind to? What parts of ourselves do we just need to put a blindfold over so that part of our brain can be taken over by something else? And we have this ego drone going on in our brain, our prefrontal cortex, all the time. Now, if there was a blindfold put on that process and it stopped, maybe something else gets mapped in that area of the brain. Maybe we think that the prefrontal cortex is actually supposed to be for that blah, 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 but maybe it's that blah, blah, blah that's actually preventing the prefrontal cortex from being utilized by something else. And to me, I think it's more like a big garbage heap that's in the way. And it's almost like the hands of the universe would be mapped through our prefrontal cortex, and that precognition, that happening without having to think about it, needing to abstract about it first. If we're walking around in life and there's billions of bits of information around us and we're moving about space, yet we have this sort of binary, I'm going to choose between this and this going on. So maybe 2 bits of information. What do those 2 bits have anything to do with the totality? Nothing whatsoever. Yet we think we need this little decision-making process to guide us when there's the totality, there's the energy. And I think that when we don't have this little thing going on in our prefrontal cortex, that's what comes in and takes over. It's like we have this little man in our head, and he's like a piece of Lego, and he's the one steering this entire complex human organism. And we think that this little piece of Lego is actually running the show, when really it's the entire universe. It's the entire earth. It's the entire Gaia sphere. It's everything. And we're part of that, and we're in that, and it's not different from us. We close our eyes, we open our eyes, and we create what we see because our brains are mapped and adapted to show us that. If we had a different brain, we would see something different. And if we weren't perfectly adapted to this, we wouldn't see it and interact with it in the way that we do. And in the same way, we can change things, and we need to help reality to level up. Because what we have created with just our little binary decision-making process is not what we would have created if we were actually in our creative state, which is our natural flow state. I don't think this is what we would have imagined for ourselves. We created our own prison of work and meaninglessness, and now we're trying to get back to this meaningful flow state within the field of meaninglessness. But we don't question the meaninglessness from which we operate in the first place. I have a question. Can I think in only questions today? And I've talked before in another video somewhere that my brain doesn't really have a linear thought process. At least I don't hear it. I don't hear my own voice, my own head. But I guess it's more amusing just to consult questions sometimes. I only have a few times really, but just to sort of look at them. It's more a game. It's not really thinking, oh, I need to consult the questions or I won't be in flow. It's more like I'm in flow and I can consult questions or not consult questions. It doesn't really matter either way. I was listening to Matt Kahn, and a lot of what he says is nice, and I was enjoying it and stuff, and he said a really cool question actually. He said, who would you be if no one needed you? And in a way that suspends the ego a bit, because it's like, well, all that is kind of false. If nobody needed me, who would I be? And I think I like that question. Because I still definitely participate in stuff thinking it seems like it implies that somebody needs me. If I'm working, say, in the mental health field, it's kind of like, oh, I can help with mental health. So it implies that need. So I like the question of who would I be if no one needed me. If nobody needed me, I probably, I don't know if I would work in mental health. I feel I work in it mostly just because that's the paradigm I was sort of put into. It's like the morphogenetic field of how I was birthed back into this reality. I was birthed back into this reality by going through the mental health paradigm, and I surrendered to it and I just went through it. When really I wanted to say, screw these meds, I'm taking off to California, bye. And I probably would have never seen anybody again. But I decided to stay here and just go through it. So it's just the trajectory of all of that. And I feel like I could take it or leave it. For now, I'm working in it, but if nobody needed me, if I felt no one needed me, and that then maybe I wouldn't work in mental health. But so I like that question. But then in the talk, about an hour in, he started getting people to repeat stuff, and I don't know, I just found it really lame. Like, it went on for like a long time. I skipped ahead and it was still happening, and it seemed like 10 minutes, and it just seemed very pacifying. I don't know, like people were just getting lulled to sleep, and I don't know, I didn't like it. It gave me the heebie-jeebies, actually. But I do like a lot of what he has to say. Another question is, how can I have more energy? And if you think about how the ego wastes energy, one thing is to not get caught in one story. That's a way to not waste energy and have more energy. Or if I'm about to eat some kind of food that might not give me as much energy, it's going to make me a little bit more aware if I'm thinking in terms of having more energy. I've actually started going to bed so early lately. I've been going to bed between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. and I've been waking up between like 4 and 6 a.m. So I still sleep a lot, but it's interesting. Instead of going to bed like 11 and waking up at 9, by going to bed at 7 and waking up at 5, I actually feel like the days are nearly twice as long. I'm not sure why, but I feel like I get a lot done. I feel like I have time to do the few sort of physiology practices to keep my body healthy, and then shower and be ready and have lots of time and energy in the day. Not only that, if I go to bed really early, I can always make sure I get enough sleep, because whether I wake up at 5, 7, 6, I've had a lot of sleep, and so I always have lots of energy through the whole day. It's not like I wake up tired and then have to barely make it through the day the whole day, and then go to bed late and repeat the same thing over and over. And I find I am tired between 7:30 and 8:30, and instead of having those sort of like lame-o hours and just sitting around doing kind of nothing at night and being tired, because I was tired all day anyway, I just go to bed and I sleep during that time. And then it just feels like the day is so much longer. It's really weird. So I've been doing it for probably about 3 or 4 weeks now. And I just really am liking it, because I have all these hours in the morning where I'm energetic. It's good. I've seen stuff on the internet about people who are early risers and they're more productive and stuff. and I never really tried it. I only happened upon it because I had to wake up early for work for a number of days. And then I happened to go to bed really early one night, then I woke up early the next day and felt really good. And so I just kept on that schedule. So it happened by accident, and I'm liking it. Like right now it's 5 o'clock, and I feel like even if I went to sleep right now for some reason, I feel like I've done a lot today. And maybe it just feels like I've done a lot just because I was alive. I had energy. I wasn't thinking about myself and how I was suffering because I didn't have energy. And if that happens all day long, that's kind of a tiresome day. So even if I was doing stuff I liked and I'm tired, that sucks. Another question I have is, what would a manic person do? Or what would I do if I was manic? It's a spontaneous state. It's a fun state. It's a playful state. So it's just another way to sort of direct me towards embodying my mania. And one of the things I've been a lot more consciously aware of in the last month or two is really about how I'm showing up somewhere. And it seems so obvious, but just really being consciously aware of what it is I'm doing next. So if I'm facilitating a group, almost just consciously adjusting my energy before I get to the group, so I show up exactly as I need to be for the group. And that's pretty obvious, but I've really been more consciously aware of that, and it's had a good effect, I think. Another one is, how can I master my reality, or how can I master my life? And I've in the past studied a bit about mastery and self-mastery and the path to enlightenment, and I feel like a person that has that manic consciousness can also work towards self-mastery, like mastering mania. And part of my experience in the last number of months since I was hospitalized made me really realize that I need to master myself and master this energy, because I can't let it come in and say get too high or too out there. And really this is about monitoring my own energy levels, making sure I get enough sleep, just really taking care of myself in different ways that I might have been a little bit lazy with before, I guess. I guess it's just being really, really watchful of myself, because with that energy, it can turn into something else really quick. So if I have that energy, that extra energy, and things arise in my consciousness, I don't think about them, but say something arises in terms of a past memory that's not so great. If I sort of am not being attentive to that, that energy caught up with that sort of mind virus can spin into something. So I've been more watchful to not allow things to spin into something. And it's just actually as simple as being aware of it and seeing it. And it's not about, oh, that was bad. It was just actually seeing it so it doesn't actually gain any momentum at all. And the reason why the ego has so much momentum is we don't actually see it. We don't see it as from the perspective of the seer beyond the ego, the witness. So we can witness it. As we witness it, it loses power. So I just picked my finger, for example, and there's blood, right? So if I thought oh my gosh, I'm bleeding, and then I think of that time where there was blood on the red pepper, and then I kind of scare myself, and I get into some kind of fear mode, then maybe my energy would be different. And that if the other energy comes in, it's going to feed whatever kind of energetic state that I'm in. And that's why it's important to really have my physiology in order. And I haven't actually been eating that healthy lately, and it's not really seeming to bother me at all. I do want to actually eat healthier at some point. One of the reasons I haven't been eating so healthy is because I did manage to accumulate a bit of debt because I was in the hospital, and then I was traumatized in the hospital, and then I was like keeping my stress so low because I was afraid to go back to the hospital and be traumatized again. But then now I have my representation agreement and my advance directive, so I feel safer. So now I've definitely upped my level of work and activity, so I'm paying off my debt. And so when I get out of debt, hopefully by the end of this year, I'm then going to maybe focus again on eating a little bit healthier. I haven't been eating tons of crap, but I've just been eating a lot of rice with like packaged Indian food goop on it, which is really delicious. I would just like to eat a lot more vegetables. I have been in places in my life where I eat a ton of raw food. I was 100% raw vegan. I was juicing every morning. I was making smoothies. I was making zucchini pasta. I was super healthy. I was 105 pounds. I felt really, really good. And that's how I was eating actually before I went into my first manic consciousness, my first extreme flow state. So that's another way actually I feel to get into flow, if one wants to get into flow, is be 100% raw vegan for a long period of time, at least 10 months. A lady, Victoria Butenko, she's really great at explaining why raw foods are very beneficial. She has a DVD called 12 Steps to Raw Food, and she talks about how cooked food is an addiction. And it is in a way. When I was on 100% raw, I didn't think about cooked food at all after a certain period of time, and I had no desire to eat it whatsoever. Now it would probably be difficult for the first bit for me to go 100% raw again. And I used to be quite attached to the whole 100% raw thing, but now I feel like I'm not that attached to it because it's one of those things. If I was 100% raw, I would be spending probably $600 to $700 a month on groceries. I'd be spending an hour or two a day on food prep if I was juicing. I could do it pretty fast, so maybe like an hour and a half. And just stuff like that. And to me, if I'm super attached to it, it's kind of like reinforcing my ego too. It's great to do it for the body, but I feel like if one isn't in one's ego consciousness and super attached to things, that ego consciousness being attached to things and trying and effort and force and just basically abusing oneself to force oneself into a way of being because one thinks that's the best way, that's actually counterproductive because it wastes energy. I talked about before how the ego wastes energy, and it also changes the energy field of the body by creating the neuropeptides of sadness, anger, judgment, self-hate, and all these things. And so what I'm saying is, if one can sort of let go of all of that and the judgment, and one doesn't have the ego consciousness so much with all that stuff, one's not wasting the energy, one's not needing perfect food, nutrition, in order to have energy. Because the energy of the universe is way more powerful. If manic consciousness energy comes in, I could be up for days. I've never done that. But if I wanted to, I could be up for days. I could be running a marathon, all that stuff. So energy doesn't necessarily come from food. When we're in our ego consciousness and we need all that nutrition and stuff to counteract what the thinking process is doing to us. So we're literally killing ourselves with our own thoughts, feelings, and actions, because that is just reinforcing the ego, the me, protecting oneself from oneself and trying to protect oneself from society, which we're all a part of and we all co-created. And so that's why I'm not really attached to the raw food thing anymore, because it can become just another ego thing. Now, if I got some kind of physical health diagnosis for some reason, I would probably go raw, because I feel that would give my body the chance to get rid of some of the accumulated stuff. But I feel when the ego is not the primary operator, there's not that much more really accumulating. In a way, it's maybe like a freeze frame for the body, so it buys a person time. And that's the thing I like about just eating the rice and the Indian food stuff, because I just make a couple days worth of rice and I buy a couple days worth of the Indian packaged food, and I just put the rice from the fridge in a pot and put the Indian stuff and stir it up. I don't use a microwave. I can't remember the last time I used a microwave. So it's really fast. And right now, it could be because I'm in this state where it's really difficult to take care of myself. Like, I can't actually imagine going to the store, buying all this food, prepping it up, making it all nice for myself. I don't know, it seems weird. Like, I don't actually remember how I did that. I don't have that sense to do that. If I had a lot of money, I'd probably go to different places and buy their raw food and stuff and support the people out there that are trying to make it more available. That would definitely be cool. But right now, I feel a lot more resonant with just putting stuff in a pot and stirring it up and eating it, because it's like it's food I'm eating. I'm grateful, and it doesn't need to be more than that. And I feel less worried about its effect on me as I was before. And it seems like the last time I was really worried about the effect on me and I was doing the completely raw diet, then manic consciousness came in and I ended up in the psych ward eating psych ward food, and I was no longer raw vegan. And since then, I haven't been 100% raw vegan. I did quite a bit of it for a while, and I again was in good shape, and my body was good. And I might go back to that. But what I'm saying is that doesn't necessarily have much to do with one's energy. So I'm more concerned about being energetic in the day. With my new sleep pattern, I'm energetic. And the food, it does zap my energy a little bit, but not huge. And another thing is too, I'm more susceptible to going into extreme manic consciousness. So if raw vegan food actually augments that, I don't necessarily need that to be augmented. I have pretty good energy, and I have to watch to not have too much energy. So I don't feel I need to eat super healthy, because I do actually need some things to keep me grounded in reality. Like, I do take one medication in a relatively small dose, and I feel that keeps me grounded in this reality. And if I didn't take it, I would probably see a lot more than I already see, and I'd probably get kind of upset about it, and I'd also feel I want to take action on it, and then I just would be a ping pong ball. And this is not a ping pong ball society. It's a consider the day and schedule stuff and all that. So it keeps me more resonant with that. And it's interesting, what I take is a heavy metal, and it's kind of like the opposite of lightness, which is kind of how one is in the manic consciousness. And it's also like a capacitor in a way, because it has a positive charge. And if I think that I might have extra energy going through me, which is electrons, which is negative charge, it's kind of like keeping the electrons. It's like I'm more of a capacitor than just like diffusing all that energy all the time. So I don't know if that's true. What can I create today? Oh, that's the other thing, is today I had breakfast and I'm hungry, but I've been drinking juice from Costco all day, because tomorrow I'm going to write the Mensa test. I think it's just more funny than anything else, and I don't think I'm gonna pass. But I figured, since digestion takes up like 70% of energy if I don't eat the rest of today, as well as tomorrow up until the test, maybe I'll be a little bit more clear. And I would just think it's funny if I passed, and I don't think I will. Maybe one day I will, but I've never tried. It's just one of those things that I'll try, and they have their like friends and family discount on or something, so it's like $30, which isn't that much. So I just think it's kind of funny, that's all. Because the Mensa test is actually kind of opposite to what I'm saying with this whole manic consciousness. Mensa and IQ is sort of the way of thinking of the training of society, and I don't think my brain really works like that anymore. It would be interesting to think of like intelligence as this like vast expanse of possibilities, and then the Mensa IQ is like this one little thing. And I'd like to imagine that my brain maybe encompasses all of it, including the little Mensa thing. But if I don't pass, then it might mean that Mensa is just too narrow-minded, and maybe my brain can't really focus in on that. And either way, I don't give a crap. What can I create today? What is my contribution? What is my gift? What is my service? Most of these questions are about how I need to be, or what can I give? What can I share? What can I help with? How can I be of service? It's not about, how do I get this little pleasure met? That's so boring. What can I do to help another today? How do I share where I'm at and lead by example? How do I be my best self in service of humanity? Is my service to humanity to be my best self? And that might be true. And that's the thing, is the questions are kind of warped. But because I feel like to be one's best self is one's service, and you don't have to do anything. And that's the thing. In the manic consciousness state, just being that version of oneself is the doing. There's no conscious thinking of trying to do something other than what one is in the moment, responding to the moment exactly as the moment needs. And so these questions are kind of weird, because they're almost like, I need to do something. But they're not about, okay, I'm going to go do that. It's just about opening up the brain cells of awareness. It's more about scrambling the ego with something else, utilizing words in a different way than the repetitive inner critic. It's using words to maybe break up the words of the inner critic, because we're being used by our words. We're being used by words in general. And I might have said this in a different video, that we're being sentenced to a life sentence of other people's sentences. Most of the things that we think we got from somebody else, like somebody said, oh, you're too fat, or you're too thin, or you're too this, and that sticks in our brain and goes on repeat. So it's just from somebody else. A lot of it we didn't actually think up ourselves, and then we're poisoning ourselves with it. Literally, these thoughts are actually changing our physiology, and they're literally killing us. And then as we walk around in this I'm killing myself state, we are killing other people at the same time. Another question is, what can I see? What is possible to see? What else can I see? And we're so used to seeing the same thing every day that we don't see anything at all. We become habituated to it, and it's there, but it's not there, and it disappears. So we're actually making things disappear until we're living a life where we don't even really like years will go by and we'll be like, what has even happened? Like nothing's really happened in these years. But it's just because we're in this habituated process. And then people say, oh, 30 days to create a new habit. The process of habit itself is flawed. We turned ourselves into a bunch of habits and we think we just need to create new habits. We don't ever see beyond the habit. We don't say, what else can I see? What else is there? And the answer is everything else besides this. But we just don't see it because we don't know there's something else to see. And actually in the DVD Masks of Madness by Dr. Abram Hoffer, he talks about how he said, I can't remember what it was, I'm going to say 70 or 80% of mental illness is a perceptual disorder. It's a disease or a trouble of seeing. And we usually see with our thoughts, but we're not really, that's not true seeing. And when I think about the states that I've been in where I'm kind of in a psychosis and stuff, it's thoughts and it's images. So though my brain doesn't normally operate that way, it can come in and take me over and nearly kill me. And that's when I really see how dangerous that stuff is. It's really so dangerous, but we don't see it that way. And so that's the thing I've been more aware of and not humoring like I might have before. And that's if something comes into my mind, arises in my consciousness that even resembles that, I just kind of like, not now. That's not happening now. That's not what's happening right now. And not allowing that to spiral at all. Not even to one association. Not even one association at all. Another question I have is it that people just want to be heard? And I've another thing I've been sort of noticing recently is that a lot of times I have the urge to speak and like blah, and share and everything, and I feel like, oh, I have a lot to say, but I've been erring on the side of really listening to people and giving other people the opportunity to speak. Not that I didn't before, but now I'm erring on the side of I will say nothing. And if I'm facilitating a group or something and I could share an example, or I could say, what do you think? I say, what do you think? And give other people a chance to be heard, because I can speak on videos to myself. And by doing that, I'm sort of releasing that energy of speaking, and then in my daily reality where I'm in the relational mind aspect of myself, I'm being more receptive, and I feel like that's changing my energy from having, the urge to speak. And this isn't even an urge like my ego. This is that energy and that flow. It's changing the flow slightly to just receiving and flowing with others. So being so empty that I have nothing to say. And maybe I do have stuff to say, but it's not pre-planned at all, in that I have no intention going into the interaction. And that gives more space for whatever to arise that needs to arise. And that's not to say I never speak and say stuff. I do. But people want to be heard. I've wanted to be heard because of some of the things that I've gone through with the system and stuff, but I guess I'm translating that to video by talking to myself, and then just going about being with people in a little bit different way. I have a question. What pitches can I throw to the universe today? And I heard that first said in a documentary called, maybe it was called Thoughts or Things or something. I can't remember what it was. It was something about thoughts. And the guy talked about how you sort of throw pitches to the universe. You eventually you'll sort of hit a home run or something. And it's just kind of like putting things out there, and that's more like, oh, if I thought of sending an email to somebody to open a line of communication, I could do that. And who knows what that'll lead to. Another concept I've kept with me for years is the concept of having the universe on my side. And so if something kind of goes downhill, I think, well, I need to get the universe on my side. So that means I have to up my game and do a bit better in reality, and the universe will be back on my side. And I'm not saying that's true, but it's kind of a fun game. It's more fun than, oh, the world owes me something and I'm going to whine and cry about stuff. It's more, okay, I got to do something. So I might even do something like donate $20 to a charity online, just to be like, to put that intention out there. Okay, universe, like, yeah. And it kind of goes in line with what I was talking about embodying one's mania and world-centric consciousness, and we're all one. It's sort of like acknowledging that we're all one, so it doesn't matter if I give away $20 to a charity. It's the same as giving it to myself. I have a question about how can I motivate others to be their best self? And I have no idea if these videos are going to do anything like that, but I'm not trying to actually teach anything per se, or say, oh, you have to do this or you have to do that. I just feel like creating a lot of dialogue with myself is just creating context. It's sort of, the context is sort of the place from which we see things, and the content is the particular stuff in which we see. And I'm not talking about the content, the particular stuff. I'm talking more about the context and actually maybe changing the way we see a little bit. Not saying see this way, but by saying look at how we normally define seeing and thinking, and talking about it in so many different ways that it might open us up to see it in a slightly different way. And I don't know if that's true, but there's a quote by Wayne Dyer that says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And there's another quote by somebody, it's saying it's not in something something, but it's in having new eyes. And there's another quote about how something about the kaleidoscope of our mind, and the world is the ever-adjusting picture of our moving thoughts or something. So there's a lot of quotes about the seeing itself and just having new eyes. And that's the thing. It's not about, oh, do this, step 1, step 2, step 3. We love that. We love, yeah, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. It's about seeing, just changing the way one actually sees and experiences life. Like, do we see it through the ego process, or do we see it as we are it and we're just seeing? And if there's that shift, there's nothing to do. What random acts of kindness can I do today? I'm big on random acts of kindness. And the thing with these videos too is that at some point, I think when I start working a little bit less, I want to move into actually doing more of these things instead of like seeing them and seeing and understanding them. But it's another thing to move into that way of being. And I'm wondering if that will make me go into manic consciousness, because partly having my little habitual routine keeps me habituated to this morphogenetic field of society. And I'm wondering if I go out and I'm actually in the relational mind, if I'm, changing things by being a bit of a positive social contagion with spontaneous social behaviors, a pattern interrupt, a cognitive dissonance creator, a heart resonator. I'm not sure what that will do. So I'm being a bit cautious about that, but I'm hoping by the time I actually put these videos out there, if I do at all, that I will be embodying my mania, that I will have created a manic lifestyle design at least a couple of days per week, and perhaps even be having some of these dialogues with people out and maybe recording them as well. and going from there. So yeah, it's kind of funny to put all this video stuff together and then just be kind of sitting here like a lump on the couch. But that's not to say I don't do stuff during the day. I do, but it's a little mechanical. How much can I smile today? I can't remember where I heard it, but somebody said that one of the therapies for bipolar disorder is just to smile for 20 minutes a day. And that again is how the physiology and our posture and our gesture, even the gestures of our face, how we hold our face, actually changes things inside ourselves. So smiling is important. It maybe helps. And there's more to it with that whole laughter yoga thing. I tried it once. It was kind of funny. And I think it would help people for sure. And one thing I would like to create more in my life is laughter. When I lived in a mental health community and I worked at an office after that, it was like a 4-year, probably a 3-year period of time that I was laughing my butt off every day, numerous times. And that produces oxytocin, which creates epigenetic changes, which changes the physiology of the body, and it's healing. So just as the flow state was healing for Stephen Coulter, I think the laughter state and the oxytocin state is very powerful for healing as well, especially for being healing sort of mentally. And living on my own and stuff, it's not as funny. How can I positively impact others? I love positively impacting others. If I have some kind of little thing that I do and it comes up in conversation and they take it on and they're like, wow, I just love that. I just want people to be healthy and happy. I actually just get so thrilled when people make positive changes in their life. I don't have that whole like envy or jealousy thing going on. It's such a waste and a poison to oneself. And another thing is, what are my possibilities and my potentialities? And that's really important because manic consciousness is a state of seeing possibility everywhere. And the possible becomes probable. And once these possibilities everywhere, one looks, so many possibilities, one can predict the future of every path one sees because one just extrapolates to infinite possibility. And so by, again, asking the brain to open up to possibilities, it's opening the brain up to that extra energy, to that manic consciousness, which is the power of the universe, which animates us and directs us and moves us in the ways that it has designed us to be naturally. And that energy takes us over and it dissolves temporarily the false ego structures and the ego structures that reside in our cellular memory, in our muscle memory, in our muscle tension, in our contortions of how we hold ourselves. And that just comes in and breaks it all up and shows us all of what's possible. And then poof, we come back to this regular state of consciousness with a huge hangover and think, how can I ever get back to that? It was so powerful and so huge. It was so immense. And there's nothing we can do to get back there, except for everything or nothing. But just by being open to possibility. And the ego is the known. It's collapsed wave function. It's not even what's happening, it's illusion, but the ego prevents us from seeing our possibilities. You know, the deepest depression, I've experienced that, is like no possibilities. Can't see anything possible for one's life, ever. Can't even see the possibility of getting off the couch. Not even knowing what to do. It's so impossible. And the opposite end is mania, where everything's possible. And everything's possible for everyone. And one sees that. So again, it's about seeing. In depression, we see nothing. In mania, we see everything. And so it's about that, from that level that we're seeing. And so asking about possibilities. How can I be unconditionally loving? That one's easy and difficult. It's easy to not be judgmental, but it's easy also to spot the ego, and seeing its falseness feels like a judgment, and seeing how it makes people suffer feels like a judgment. And I don't know about that one. And Krishnamurti's question is there a totally different way of living? And that to me is manic consciousness and spontaneous social behaviors. What would it take to get the world to shift from competition to cooperation and collaboration? How do I invite more synchronicity into my life? And I feel synchronicity is somewhat synonymous with mania as well. And the thing with synchronicity is one has to be prepared to follow it, to act on it. If one sees synchronicity but is like, I'll get to it later, it's over. So I guess part of me, once I do venture out and I'm more in synchronicity, I feel like I'll be in more flow with the universe in my actual daily living, as opposed to sort of in it and out of it at the same time. So perhaps I'm preparing myself to enter back into synchronicity, and just making a little bit of effort to again be effortless, because the effortless is when we don't feel ourselves.